Audio. Right in.
All right, I'd like to call this meeting to order. Will you take roll, please?
Mrs. Leskowicz,
Here.
Mrs. Butler,
Here.
Mrs. Donahue, here, Mr. B,
Here.
Mrs. Kiplinger.
Here. Stand for the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next is the adoption of the agenda, and I would like to conduct an executive session this evening at the end of our agenda, and it would be to discuss and consider discipline of an employee, discuss and consider investigation or complaints against an employee, conference with board attorney to discuss subject to pending or imminent court action. So can I get a motion to add executive session, an executive session to our agenda for those reasons I just noted?
I'll move.
Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Okay, is there any discussion? Will you take roll, please?
Mrs. Leskowicz,
Yes?
Mrs. Butler,
Yes.
Mrs. Donahue,
Yes.
Mr. B,
Yes.
Mrs. Kiplinger.
Yeah. Okay, and so we'll go into executive session under item 6 later on after the presentation. So now we have public participation. Do we have for agenda items? Do you have any?
We have Julie, please.
No, I'm Penny.
Annie? Oh, I don't know.
It's not on anything.
Donna?
Penny.
Annie? Okay.
Okay.
Well, we only have, okay.
Right, now we have our special presentation.
We're gonna adopt the agenda.
Yeah, I was gonna say that we added, now we need to adopt it.
We're gonna make a motion to change.
Okay.
I'll move to adopt the agenda.
A second. Any discussion? Take roll, please.
Mrs. Leskowicz?
Yes.
Mrs. Butler?
Yes.
Mrs. Donahue?
Yes.
Mr. B?
Yes.
Mrs. Kiplinger? Yes.
Now we're ready.
All right. Well, thanks again for having us back in front of you. We have a few findings to present, and a lot of it'll just be more discussion information. We're still in the gathering information phase, and we want to talk through some things related to that. I'm going to go through just a quick overview, and then we'll get into details on several of the topics, but I at least wanted to give you a feel for kind of the items we'll be discussing. So we had a good discussion with the OFCC and have some information from that. We had open meetings with all of the staff at each school where anybody could come in and spend time talking to us verbally. We followed up from that with a survey of the staff and board. I think a couple of you were able to respond to that, just to gather additional information from those that weren't able to attend or had additional thoughts they wanted to add after our in-person meetings. Tim came down and did some photographing of existing spaces, compared them to some of the floor plans we have been given, just to make sure that everything we're working with is accurate. Started doing some site research.
Yeah, spent the entire day. There was various things that we saw from the plans that were given. No fault of the school district, that just they were very old, things that weren't updated. You really should have been given some updated plans. So we spent the time to rework and kind of get an understanding of what is actually here versus what we thought was here.
So tonight we want to get some direction on OFCC engagement and involvement, talk about potential for some summer projects, and get some feedback from all of you as board members, and then talk about community engagement and when and how that will come into play as we continue to move forward with the planning process. So starting with the OFCC info, Valerie Montoya is the planner that had been involved in the K-5 project, and she is happy to come back and answer any questions you all have. She has since been put into a different position, and moving forward, if you continue to work with the OFCC on another project in the near future, Tyler Palmer is the name of the planner that would most likely become your planner. But since he has no knowledge or prior history with the district, Valerie said she's happy to come answer questions. Currently, the district, as we had shared previously, is in a deferred status. So back about 10 years ago, the OFCC came around to a bunch of different school districts and said, are you interested in doing anything with us? At the time, Bethel's local share was 80% and the state share was only 20%. So at the time, the conversation would have been, would you like to do a project right now? Your funding, you would be responsible for 80% of the cost. And either they didn't get a response or the response was, we're not interested at this time, which makes sense to us. Many districts are turning down state funding at that level. They were proceeding to talk to various school districts and they ended up with 100 districts on the list that were interested in doing some kind of work. So anybody that had said no or hadn't responded, they put them on a deferred list and they said, we have to get through this first 100 to make this manageable. So in that time, they're about halfway through the list. They said there's 50 left. They had some additional districts that they had to work through as well that added to the list. I'll get into that in a second. They said they expect the last 50 to go faster than the first 50, but it still could be quite some time before they are through that first 100 schools and Bethel would be able to be in line for the facilities assistance program funding where they would bring their money in and say, okay, are you ready to build? So the project that the district just completed in the pre-K to 5 was ELPP, which means the district comes up with your own funding and then the state would give you credit for that as part of the master plan. The current master plan that you have, when that project was started, you locked in your district percentage. So you are now locked in at 80% state, 20% local, so completely flip-flopped. Since then, you've slid a little bit more to where the state would pay for more, but because you locked in, like that's it. If it goes up or down, you're set with that, which is a really good percentage. The master plan then had tearing down anything that was prior to like 1999 and then building a complete 612 addition so the high school would be part of the work. And the finished product would be a 612 building. You'd keep the PK to 5 and have 2 buildings. So that's what we confirmed with the state, that with how much enrollment has changed, you're not locked into that master plan. You can completely revisit, you can do reconfiguration of grades, you can look at different options and things like that. The other projects that I mentioned that piled on top of the initial 100, those were called exceptional needs projects. So when the funding years ago was available, if somebody wasn't high on the list to be ready, but could prove an exceptional need, such as what you're going through right now with your enrollment, there was a process to get in line and kind of move to the front of the line. They worked through the districts that really needed that, and then they came to additional districts that were starting to apply for it. They either really didn't need it or they started down the process and then changed their mind. And the state has to put a lot more work and dollars that they're spending into qualifying districts for that program. And they said, we're spending a bunch of money and nobody's even using this program anymore. So they discontinued it. With how long you have to wait for the facilities assistance program, our recommendation is to talk to any public official that you might have relationship with, state legislature, push like at the higher levels of the OFCC to see if they would make an exception to their discontinuing of the program and allow another round of that for things that might have changed or come up for districts. I think that the situation that you're all in with the enrollment increasing and then continuing to increase, that's not typical. I think you're well justified in making that ask to be able to jump to the front of the line, especially because you already spent your local dollars towards the project. the rest of the project is supposed to be funded by the state. So you shouldn't have to go spend more money and then be refunded all of it. You should be able to have your state funding, and with the increases in enrollment, I don't know that you can afford to wait as long as the state would come with their share, if that makes sense. So as far as next steps with the state, they said that as it stands right now, without an exceptional needs program, you could re-enter the ELPP program, which would have locally funded projects. If you wanted to do a piece of a project, a segment of the total master plan, you could go ahead and do another portion of construction through that program. When you enroll in it, it doesn't mean that you're required to do that, because you would still have to go out and raise money. The voters could turn you down. It just means that you're entering into the program to potentially do something. The benefit of getting back into that program is that you would get a new enrollment projection for the next 10 years, and you would get a new reassessment of your district buildings. And all of that is free for the district to participate in. So you would receive that information, look at new master plan options with the state. We help with that as well. And then determine a path forward. And at that point, you could decide to go out for a bond issue or not. Once you have that additional information, you're not forced to do anything by signing up. So the only thing that is needed in order to get back into the program is a board resolution, which they have online. We could provide it to you. And you would just pass that at a board meeting and then provide them that signed resolution. And then they almost immediately put you in line to get the enrollment projections completed. And I want to say that last time I did that, it took me 30 days. And then the enrollment projection was back. I know I just went through a whole bunch. So what questions do you have?
So what would the cons be of getting back into that program? Any?
You're not locked into anything. It's really just a step forward saying, hey, we're wanting to investigate. They come forth, they bring those two items to you free, that projection, and also the assessment of the buildings, which would be all the buildings. And we've seen other school districts go through that process, say, thank you for the information. We're going to come back at a later date. And there's no issue. You're not having to pay for something then because you said no. It's part of the state funding and what they're providing.
Okay, thanks.
And you're saying, so even though that was all new construction, we can still renovate whatever we need to, right? Like there's no limit to say, we can't take down those walls, we can't reconfigure certain rooms. We can do whatever is necessary.
Correct. Your increase in enrollment changes your needs as a district, and you can do reconfiguration of spaces as long as it ends up being part of your final master plan. It would be co-fundable work. If you decided to do something that that wasn't needed as part of the master plan, that might be different. But when you're out of classroom space and you're creating additional classrooms, that would be considered something that's co-fundable.
We've seen sports things, amenities for sports that would be locally funded rather than from the state. But if it's going directly for the students, things they need for the classrooms, it would easily be part of that.
Okay. So when you're talking about the enrollment, is it going to be a projected enrollment, or is it going to be our actual increase?
So
They'll
look at, like with the new housing that's coming, they look at anything that's already through planning processes and kind of on the books. If it's so-and-so is going to be buying this property and they might do a development, they don't count that kind of stuff. But when there's officially known increases, they will count that. They also said that the people that do the enrollment projections typically use an average number of students per household. But because you just went through all of that growth, we can look at how many houses and how many students. And if it's higher, we could give them that information and they would use the higher per capita number rather than just going on an average that they do. So that's one thing that we would want confirmed is looking at the number of houses that were built and then checking the student enrollment numbers to see how that correlated. So we could say.
Would they count all the houses that are projected to be built in CT2?
Is if it's been submitted as plans to the like whatever process the county or whoever reviews the plans, it's a little bit different in every jurisdiction. But as long as there's been something submitted,
So the developer
review,
has submitted
yes.
something, so they could use that and say, hey, we're gonna build 300 new houses,
yes.
then they could use that.
Even if it's by phase, like our first phase will have 150, and then our second phase will have 150.
Yeah, I mean,
Because that, I think, it can be our problem, because that's what
Mhm.
CT does it in phases.
correct. Usually there's a master plan that says,
Mhm.
okay, we're gonna have 8 phases total. And
Mhm.
it's gonna be phase 1, we're gonna focus in on this, but it's still, the end of the story. We know, hey, there's gonna be 8 phases, I'm just throwing that out.
Yeah.
And it's going to encompass this area of land. Typically, that's how it's done with planning and zoning. They don't wanna know the first chapter, they wanna
Right.
know the whole book of
Yeah.
what it's going to be.
And because this developer has already done it once and completed it,
Uh-huh.
it's not like it's a new startup that
Right.
may or may not
Yeah.
We have some
come to
historical
fruition.
background.
Yeah,
I
Exactly.
mean, recent historical background.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's why when Mel noted looking at actual statistics of what's going on now, rather than somebody at the state saying, well, it's 0.2 per house. Well, it's really in this area, it's 0.4.
Yeah.
Something along those lines.
So do you know how they would do the projection as far as like what grade level? Because CT1 really drove up our elementary, but now that all the homes are supposed to be a lot more expensive than CT2, our fear is it might be middle school, high school age kids coming into our district versus elementary. So we don't wanna recreate what we did with CT1, thinking we're gonna go through the same thing again, and then come to find out we're not getting the little kids in, we're gonna get middle school and high school.
yeah, I don't know the level of detail that, how they do their formulas. But I think that because we have so much information known already about the development and what's happened before and what they're planning, that we, as long as we provide all of that information to them, and then when they're done with it, there's an opportunity to sit down with the state and ask questions and clarify things. So we could request that that company be in the meeting. If that's not permitted, we can at least ask the questions and the state can verify it to validate it and make sure that everything is, makes sense.
So you said are big steps. Do we physically as a board have to do something like that?
The resolution.
You have to pass a resolution.
Okay.
And we have that paperwork information.
Yeah, yeah, we can send that along too. And then, again, if you felt like you had more questions or wanted to understand things deeper, Valerie's happy to hop into a board meeting. She can also do like a Zoom call with a couple people. If you guys wanted to designate somebody to get more information directly from her. She said that years ago, she had come to a board meeting and had the board and the public asking questions, trying to get a better understanding of the program. Okay. All right, so next is the staff feedback. So we're gonna put up a couple images on the screen. So this represents, just so you can get a feel for the variety of feedback we received. This represents numbers. For example, this is just the survey numbers. The high school had 13 people fill out the survey, which represented 23% of respondents. The middle school was 10 people, which was 18%. But we did put a note on there. The middle school by far had the highest representation in person when we sat through those meetings. So a lot of them probably felt like we already, gave the information we had. And then there were a few staff members, 4 of them that responded that shared time between the elementary school and middle school. So we split them out instead of like double counting them. Elementary school has 18, which is 32%, and the central office, which we counted anybody that worked district-wide or that worked as part of the administration, we counted as that, and that was 11 people for 20%. So as far as surveys go, in today's day and age, we felt like that was pretty decent. And it was not a survey where you're asking them to answer A, B, or C,
Mhm.
and you can just spit out these bar charts. We're trying to gather really detailed information, people to kind of share stories with us and history and get a really good understanding. So there's not like a clear and concise way to graphically represent the results. I know Mike shared the spreadsheets with you all. I don't know if you had a chance to read through them. There was a lot there. So Tim came up with the idea, which I really liked, of showing words that represented comments we heard, and the larger words came up more often than the smaller words, kind of just like a word graphic, just for like a quick snapshot of what some of the challenges were. We separated them out by category of respondent because people at the elementary school have different concerns than people at the high school. So this just gives you kind of a feel for some of the things that have been brought up. So some of the comments related to things that would be pretty fairly simple short-term fixes. Some of them referred more to long-term planning items, and we're working our way through both of those. I think that the overall theme at the middle school is, as you would expect in any district where some of the people are in newer buildings, some of them are in older buildings, they had the most frustrating comments. They said that they have been moved around a lot as the district is growing and things are kind of moving and trying to get things figured out, that they feel like they've had to be extremely flexible, and sometimes it's every year a teacher might be moving, and they're looking for stability, but they're also looking for more better facilities long-term for the middle school classrooms. So as we plan for long-term future, one of the things that we talked about is trying to minimize, we're going to move you again for 1 year, and then we're going to move you again for another year, and then you'll be in your permanent spot. Like trying to think for the long term, how can we do this kind of shuffling around in a way that makes it palatable, and there's a horizon in sight that they can understand where they're going. I think the biggest concerns at the high school related to the open space, noise issues, and the glass. And you all brought that up when we had our first meeting here, and we said, what are some of the challenges? So those are some low-hanging fruit areas that we could address as well. And these are some of the things that we talk about. Summer project potential is how can we, in the short term, create some additional spaces that can be used by the district that would be in locations where they would stay permanently, and maybe doing things to the glass that would be a permanent fix. At the same time, keeping in mind that we don't want to completely ignore the middle school. So there's a lot, it's almost developing a shopping list. So part of what we wanted to do today is, you've all kind of seen the comments that other people have had. Where do you feel like your priorities are? When we first came here, we heard many of the same comments that they've had. The security from the glazing is an issue.
Getting the demographics to understand the needs. You were open to shifting the grade configurations. Glass was a big issue. Making sure the school was still a community, still felt like the community. Utilizing spaces the best way possible. Even explore building up on top of the existing. Accessibility was an item of focus. also the oldest building, from the original construction. Can it be part of the community, can it be given, can it be sold? How much does it cost to operate? Those are things we're investigating. Elementary school needing sensory rooms. The young fives room being too small. Also the gym space needing.
So are there any new things, or, you know, now that you've seen all of this, that you would say, hey, I said this before, but I feel like this is actually more important, or anything like that, any additional feedback that you would like to share?
I still think it's the classroom space and size, I think is a big one. And I think we might still have a few teachers on carts. So that seems like
Yep.
something we should get rid of. And having space, I think we said before, for the kids, the sensory rooms and stuff
Mhm.
like that. And in order to educate, I mean, that's our job here, is educate. I think that really the classroom space and sizes has to be at the top, and security. Obviously, that's always number one.
Yeah.
Safety, security, and then classroom for learning.
And I think that it needs to be aligned around under the middle school has been the ball in play from place to place to place for years, and they're just expected to pack up and move to someplace else when somebody wants something else, and it just creates a problem of cohesion, and they don't have the connection between the subject, your department is spread out everywhere, so English doesn't have a chance to have that cohesiveness. And so they really, I really would like to spend some time really focusing on middle school to see, like you said, if we can improve things that will be pretty semi-permanent for these poor staff members that don't have to pack up at the end of every year and don't know where they're going and lose their things, and end up in a room that is different and can't accommodate all their students. So
Various people in the middle school, when we were here, they noted, yes, it's frustrating moving all the time, but if they knew, again, going back to the chapters in the book, if they knew what the end goal was,
yes,
that it was going to be better, they were willing to shift and accommodate to move to this space because we're going to renovate this space or do something to it, which was positive rather than
Sure.
them just
Yes.
saying, hey, no, we don't want to move, we're rigid. They felt very flexible from what we were hearing.
well, they're very flexible. I mean, they've been very gracious for, I don't know that you could talk to a middle school teacher who hasn't been moved several times, and not even knowing from May to August where that's going to be, so
Yeah. And
they've been great team players. I want to give a shout out to our middle school.
Yeah.
'Cause
And a lot of
they
them,
really have.
not only for the middle school, but the elementary, they care deeply. And it showed
Yes.
when we met with them that a lot of them took their own time to handle the moves, box things up, make sure things were set and ready for the students. There's a lot of caring individuals you have here.
And put them in a position where they can collaborate, so they're able to talk amongst themselves and come up with ideas and share their thoughts about this worked in my class and we can use this or something. Instead of having them all spread out all over the place, then they can't talk and collaborate and do that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
One thing that, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying the block time for collaboration, the conference rooms, breakout rooms.
Even if you're in the same proximity, just to see each other and have a few minutes.
Well, that collaboration
Yeah.
was throughout the entire survey.
Yeah.
That, everybody said that. We
Yeah.
need time to be able to get together. We need a dedicated space, a dedicated teacher space,
That's because the schedule's bad
Yes.
Yeah.
from a timing standpoint.
They talked about they had a
Yeah,
period in
the
the
high school,
morning.
middle school.
Where-
were-
You should have like a 0 period, right? I get to school
Yeah.
and nobody's here but the staff.
Yep.
Now I can plan, I can collaborate, I can have staff meetings, I can do all those things. Then the kids come.
Yes.
We don't even have time for a staff meeting. Period.
Or
An entire schedule.
Right.
Or the place. You're right. You're right. You're right.
We can put them in the cafeteria, but
I mean, that's part of it. I mean, the collaborate, and if you've got room to collaborate if you don't have kids in the building. I mean, they'll lend itself to one another, but part of that is a tiered transportation and a zero period. So, but they're right. I mean, they don't have time to collaborate or plan.
And I really think that that classroom down there would be high priority as far as the ELA classroom on the rest of the building. That is just nothing but a classroom in a hallway. And all they have is, roll around partitions up
Yeah.
that are borrowed from the art department. And then they have to get those back during
Yeah,
the art show and stuff.
That's in here.
Multiple
And you have CPG
teachers brought that
classes.
up as a concern, not just the teacher there, and someone even said that they feared for the teacher staying because multiple teachers have been through that space and then they leave because they can't stand teaching in it.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that's an easy summer project. It's not hard to get drawings and through the building permit, you know, something like that. That's a little bite-sized piece to create a permanent space. And then also in the elementary schools where some of the open areas are in the hallways, we're confirming the heights, but we thought, looking at it, that we might be able to stack a small mezzanine. If it's a smaller room, you don't need a big tall ceiling. You could just have a normal 8-foot ceiling and stack a mezzanine on there where you could have 2 small group rooms. It's the same functions. You don't have to have an ADA issue because you can have somebody in a wheelchair in the lower level. And that would give an opportunity. They just talked about how many small rooms they've like taken over every single space in the school. And there isn't anything to give. So being able to create some more permanent space that's usable, that dedicated people can be in, and then for the intervention specialists and pulling kids out for testing and things like that, it would be much more functional. We might be able to, in both of those areas, get some layers and create some additional square footage that way.
What's that?
I said, I don't know who thought those spaces were good ideas. I mean, it's like, just make a classroom.
One of our critical need was classrooms.
I know.
I mean, at any given time, our critical need has
Crazy.
been classrooms, and we kind of diverted some of the space we had available to
Yeah.
things that are non-functional
Right.
for a real need, which is classroom space.
But in theory, you could probably put 4 classrooms in the elementary, right?
Not full-size classrooms,
But
but a
4 smaller
small,
classrooms.
yeah, a usable space. There's also another spot where there's a few lockers and it's kind of a weird configuration of the hallway where we feel like we could tuck a small, like a tutor space
Like a
in.
pull-out.
Yes,
yeah.
for pull-out area, yeah, that could be done relatively easily.
And with that, then, because I think we discussed too about the Young Five program, I think we had to take a cut this year in the amount of kids that we were allowed into the Young Five. And just some of the teachers talking that I've heard, that they said it's a fantastic program, and they have the data now that supports that it is working and it is helpful. So again, making bigger spaces to allow more kids in for that program.
Yeah, this being squared off.
Yeah,
Yes.
gives you some pull-out space.
Yeah. And the ELA class is not just the classroom and the disruption and everything, it's the whole security of it as well.
Mhm.
I mean, easily somebody could drive into the building, they could set off some kind of detonate. I mean, I know these are horrible things to talk about, but it's the world we live in, and it's very possible. There's no protection whatsoever. Even to hide in the debate, if there was a shooter or something, they can't even do that.
One of the things we wanted to focus on here, I'm not sure if it's
Oh, go ahead.
getting ahead, but the safety and security, I mean, glass.
Right, yeah.
Thinking of simple things, I mean, in the survey, people talk about taking the glass out, putting up masonry walls, different things like that. But again, looking at cost, what can we do, at least to break down that visual, so your eye isn't distracted by just somebody moving down the hallway. We've worked with other school districts where vinyl graphics being applied to the glass, so you're not removing any structure, you're not removing any glass, you're just working from either side of that single pane of glass. So this potentially, and this is not saying what this graphic would look
Right.
like, but a before and an after, where you're applying a graphic to get some school spirit,
Mhm.
but if the backside of that graphic, it's opaque, so you can't see through it,
Right.
and it's white on the back, if the inside of the classroom looks like this, but then we can make that white on the backside.
Whiteboard.
Mhm.
You got it.
There's a film or a spray that could be applied where you would only have to do it to the top here, so you wouldn't
Yeah.
necessarily do the bottom, but you still get the natural light because you
Sure.
have those three. But you've got a natural whiteboard there, some additional tape up space,
Yeah, it's a great idea.
and utilize it. And you're enclosing, you're creating a safer environment. This could be an easy summer project.
And would that be like Mylar type of stuff, that coating, or is that just?
Mylar or vinyl graphic that just gets applied, and we can work with the design. They all could be the same, or they could have
Yeah.
variation, however, but you would still get the ability to, I think, have some graphics for the signage. I mean, they can work around that, and because I think we want it to be unique and playful rather than,
Yeah, like our front doors.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly.
But I think like the front doors is that material that prevents shattering, right?
All,
That's
well,
why I was just wondering if that's what this would be too, or if this is just strictly more.
Well, they have different types.
they,
Yeah.
have
they
fully
do.
resistant,
They've got different,
shatterproof,
different
yeah,
levels.
It's more expensive.
Right.
I mean, they even have the ballistic film where projectile will still go through it, but it slows it down, correct?
I was gonna ask, is there any opportunity for noise reduction with the different, options?
The frame is quite thick, so there could be potential, we haven't investigated that yet, where you could get some sort of potential foam
Mhm.
or something in place there and then apply over. It's just added cost, but the first thing was visual.
Yeah.
There's an intruder, that person doesn't know what's going on in that classroom, doesn't know if somebody's in there.
Where we heard the biggest complaints about noise was the classrooms that have like the garage door between them. So that could be a spot where you just infill it with wall.
Yes.
If that's not functioning as it was originally designed with one teacher sharing that big space.
I think I
you could
saw
just fill that in.
I think I saw one up,
Oh, yeah, they don't generally.
and that was it. And the other one said, when they moved in, it hasn't been up.
No.
Right.
I think he operated it once just to see what it did. It was loud. He put it back down and never touched it.
Yeah.
So yeah, those we can take down.
Can we sell them? Can we sell them to somebody else who wants to try?
But yeah, that would be the option, like Mel said. You don't need it for egress,
Yeah.
or safety reasons, anything like that. It's not needed. It could just become wall.
Yeah.
It
So
is
one-
distracting. I mean, I'll walk by there 2-3 times a day, and everybody, somebody's there.
That's what I would do as an adult.
You can't, as an adult, you can't help it
Right.
either.
They all look.
Something goes by and
Shiny
you
Kids look, I'm like,
So one of the other interesting things that we've been talking a little bit about is how much utility work is fed from the old original building.
all of it, all of it.
Another thing we could consider is prepping for new to bring in new utility services and kind of rerouting some of that. So that when you are ready to do something new, everything's already in place and ready to go. That will take a lot more investigative work, but it's something that we want to add to our list of things that should be
now
considered.
the elementary and middle school all come from the 1917 room, correct?
Yeah, it's that lower level
Uh-huh.
room that's on the
Yep.
back there. and
Yeah.
you get
Feeds the
that in.
entire, does it feed the high school too, or no?
No, I don't believe so. I
They
think,
built new.
I think you've got some
Two
additional.
Channels in the back.
Yeah.
I
But
think
the,
there's little tunnels under the
but the
Yep.
fact that
50s.
They're under the floor.
Yeah.
what Mel's noting is that this could be placed somewhere over here or here, refed, so that if something ever happens to this, where this is going away, or this, the 1951, 56, the 69, all that gets demoed, maybe this gets turned over to the community. Again, not saying that's what's gonna happen, but that way you're serving from another area and this could be separated, where then you could actually figure out how much of the bills for this,
Mhm.
if that's separated on its own system.
Sure.
So
And
we
that's
ended
the-
up,
That's the correct drawing.
correct, so we ended up creating this, we were
Setting
gonna
all
use
that.
the one
Like wearing the
that
red.
was,
Yeah.
in one of the offices.
That's the old, that's.
Yeah, this is all kinds of not
That's not right.
accurate.
No.
Yeah, this is from somebody in the past.
I think this was a schematic design that never ended up being built that way.
Because
That's not.
obviously the date is wrong, obviously,
Mhm.
but this was never built.
That was our elevator.
And this is completely.
Yeah, that is that's the plan before it was scrapped
Uh-huh.
to what we have now.
To what we
Yeah.
have now.
And that's all we had.
Oh.
And we can provide this, you know, if you want that for reference and records.
We have, they have to. We've done, yeah. I mean, you look back at their financials, they really didn't have much. They have to sort of put band-aids on things, so
A lot of-
it's interesting how they did that, yeah.
Okay.
Any question? What else you got, no?
When we talk about grade configurations and study options, there's so many different avenues that could be taken. Are there any configurations that you would say as a district are off the table? As an example, you could make the current elementary a PK to 4 permanently, pull the 5-6 to make it a 5-12. You could have a 5-6, 7-8 and a 9-12. You could have a PK to 6 and a 7-12. Like there's lots of things, and from an educational standpoint, that sometimes districts feel strongly one way or the other. There's bands from 5 to 6 and all that kind of stuff that you got to think about.
You okay for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 12?
Yeah.
Fish bowls. Let's say fish bowls are off the table.
Yeah, I would definitely like to get the 6th grade out of middle school. I would say that'd be one thing. I think that they're still a little bit too young for being mixed in with 7th and 8th graders. But
Yeah.
I like the idea what you said about the 5-6. So K through 4 and then 5-6.
I think 5th graders sometimes too old to be around elementary. 6th grade is too young, you're around 8th grade,
Yeah, I mean, I agree.
at least about halfway through the year.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Start to get there.
So we do have to watch with OFCC dollars, the minimum school size is 300. So as long as or no, 350, sorry, as long as we're above that threshold in any of the planning, any of those buildings would be something that could be a part of the master plan in the segment.
They'll run about 400, 2 grades.
Yeah.
Oh,
I figure
400.
you guys are probably good.
I don't, numbers
We got
hasn't
that
been
covered.
our problem.
Yeah, I think the middle schools, I think you're over 200 some each grade, well over 200.
So some of our next steps are if we can get the enrollment projections through the state, then we can start running scenarios of here's how big a 5-6 would be, here's how big a 7 to 12 would be, and what does that look like footprint wise, as far as where things would fit, and the assessments will help us review again. I know initially they said anything before 1999. Some of the staff felt like the 64, the 59 edition, there were complaints about the width of the hallways, but they're like, we're in these classrooms, they're fine, they work. So there could be this is the high end of the plan, and this is a more conservative plan, and what do those numbers look like, and talking through a lot of different options that way. We also want to make sure that we are getting with the community. We feel like we need more data before we can present to the community, because we want to bring facts and information and then help them make informed decisions and work through some master plan options and choices and then present that to them. Because they're not living in the buildings every day the way the staff are and the way that you see, they won't have the same kinds of concerns. And to just go to a community meeting and be completely open-ended, what do you want? They're like, well, what are our choices? Give me some information. So we feel like we should delay that a little bit still, but have it as part of our plan moving forward.
One of the options be to look at where, like, are we gonna keep everything on this campus? Or I know at some point people are talking about maybe a school would go into one of the carriage trails, or how would that, but that would be community input. We wanna also get their input on where they want the schools to be located, but where in this process would all that come up?
I think after the enrollment projections and we start looking at different options for what is possible, we can look and identify, if we were to consider something off-site, how much acreage does that take? What does that look like? Are there properties available that would make sense for that? And how much would that cost? And that becomes one of the plan options that could be presented and discussed further.
And then what's the pros and cons of that?
Yeah.
Right.
You have a lot of land here. So I
Yeah.
think the push would be utilize what you have, not only for the classrooms and the additions that would come from that, but also parking, looking at the circulation, field house, practice fields, everything
The
that's.
trend toward the consolidated district, if you can do
It
it.
is from an operational
From an
standpoint.
operations, It's
Yeah, it
more
is.
financially.
Mhm. And the state doesn't co-fund land purchases, so that would have to be completely locally funded.
I just have to know, so we have those two vacant, empty, can we do anything with our dead spaces?
I agree.
Oh,
that-
inside here,
Yeah,
in those courtyards.
I mean, is there any way we can utilize that?
A few of the teachers talked about trying to utilize them as outdoor classroom space. When you get into filling them in, you end up taking a lot of natural light out of a lot of the classrooms. Sometimes people try to do different activities in them that are noisy and distracting
Yeah.
because they are so close. So I think what we see most often is more of an outdoor learning lab kind of thing. that
That's
gets
what it
used
was supposed to be
periodically.
when they built the 2017 building. I mean, that's how it was built. And I don't know that it's ever been.
But they don't,
Nobody goes
No,
out there.
no, because
Nobody
the
does
noise.
that.
They
Right.
have a garden out there. They brought me stuff from the garden.
Well,
Mindy
dead
did,
now.
Like a few people
The
talked
teacher,
about
not this
if we
many,
had some
another
picnic
teacher,
tables
yeah.
or some spots for students to sit, we would go use
Uh-huh.
a space like that outside.
Yeah, nobody
I haven't
keeps
been in
it.
the garden. She just brought me tomatoes and stuff.
Mhm.
So it was like skylight roof where you could have maybe more than.
Yeah,
August-
those lights
August
you
and
put in your
April.
ceiling, the
Yeah.
natural light comes through.
Mhm. Yeah.
I mean, I never see anybody out there.
No. Well, it's hard to control the kids because it's just long enough and they. It's just a shame when we need, when we need.
Right, just to have the.
Holes, yeah.
Holes, exactly.
So getting back to the community, a lot of times, the first step a district might take would be, and I think we talked about this before, getting some of the community leaders, the people that are, most vocal and, kind of getting them together first to have some more generalized feedback and helping to refine a little bit, and then taking a more narrowed option to the community at large. What you run into sometimes if you present too many options is then nobody can agree, you can't get consensus, and then people get mad, well, you didn't pick the plan that I wanted, so now I'm not gonna support it. And so getting to like an informed, these are the two best because of all the pros and cons that we figured out, we're gonna take these two to the community, or we're gonna take these three to the community. So maybe having a small group of community members that helps pare it down to that, and then taking to the larger community.
Yeah.
So we don't have anything formal or finalized in terms of a packet of information to hand you yet, because we are still gathering things. But once we have more of all that data information, we'll also put together like a formal report of the findings, have an executive summary in there and some other things, so that you have something in your hands that relates to the study and all of the work that was done as well.
So the board's meeting later in February then?
18th.
18th.
Tuesday, next Tuesday.
Next Monday.
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Oh, right.
Then it goes back to Mondays.
So we will be sure to get you the information that you could use if
want-
wanting to pass that resolution.
I was gonna say, you want the resolution information. to
Yeah.
get on, So get going.
That's what it's
Yeah.
like, you know, if you need to hold off on the entire packet, you can just get us the resolution information.
Yeah, we want to get that moving forward. And then also, I think we'll notify the OFCC of, we'll notify the OFCC of that pending resolution. So we can work to set up a meeting if desired. We can do it by Zoom or have them come out. But we want to engage.
Yeah.
We feel like we've been here in the school, looking, observing, hearing, but we need to really engage with the state, engage with you, and get some momentum moving on that. So,
You have something like this that looks at like the entire site property with both of the schools, with the elementary included and kind of that lane that goes between them and,
How high was the drone that day?
right?
I'm only allowed to go up to 400, so,
But it was up pretty high. I'm guessing.
Oh,
so I can get something like this.
yeah,
That's good.
that's good. I mean, I think that I mean, I think really first we have to figure out, we gotta stop just throwing that up. And, you know, we need a plan, like, we need a better plan, because like, this is just, oh, let's just build something here,
Well,
let's build
yeah.
something
I
here,
mean,
let's do that.
I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, nobody's taking the time. I mean, you
No.
have a growth issue and you've got to take the time to plan. And I had told Tim and Mel too, I said, part of this exercise is to make sure that as we put things in, we put them in the right spots, so you don't have to remove them, tear them up.
Correct,
Right.
Everything has
so
a place.
it flows,
and
it makes sense.
Because you might be able
for
to
the
afford
future.
something now that, you know, you can afford something bigger later, but what I put in now, I don't want to rip up later.
Right.
I'll go back to the phases as was mentioned earlier. Again, we need to know every chapter. We need to know what that end is, not only for you guys, but for the teachers, so everybody can say, okay, my disruption for a year or two is going to lead me to this.
Yeah.
And I was talking to Tim on the way down here, even like when we talk about summer projects, even small things that might help at the middle school, we don't know if those buildings are going to stay or go. So it's hard to say we're gonna do a project to invest a bunch in the space.
Mhm.
But there are things that can make their lives easier, like cabinets that could be installed in a way that they can easily be removed and put into a new building if that happened. But a lot of the teachers are like, we don't even have cabinets in this whole bank of classrooms, and it's really difficult to teach out of them. So just thinking like in little increments of just making life a little bit easier, a little bit better while we're going through the planning process, I think it would be helpful in a way that isn't spending money that's gonna just be thrown away. It would still go to good use.
Yeah, yeah.
Return back open.
I'm just pulling up a random room. We've got all the rooms categorized.
And that's under random.
So really, so before we could do any reconfiguration type of options, we would have to know what the classes are gonna look like you talked about, 5 and 6 and K through 4, or when is.
I mean, we have a pretty good idea of what's coming, like what's in grade 5, what's in grade 6. I mean, I've got those numbers. Can we house 5 and 6 like in the old elementary, right? I mean, those are things we can do. Can I add 4
For the time
classrooms?
being.
For the time being, I mean, we can
Oh.
buy some time,
Mhm.
you know what I'm saying? We can buy some time by tier routing. But like 3-tier routing with 3 different start times. You would have with a 0 period, you would have the collaboration, the plan time that they would need, they want. Which I think is a good idea from an educational standpoint. And then like I said, we could pick maybe 4 small classrooms, a couple other classrooms. I mean, you would be able to I think, alleviate a lot of the stress in the middle school, the elementary. You know, some of our MH units, I mean, we could get them back over to the elementary, I mean, where they belong, their ADA, I mean, their own age group. I mean, there's a lot of good things that can happen from that, and it may buy us 2 or 3 years till we get where we need to get to for the next facility.
But you would define that now, and then they would go back and, okay, now we know that we have a K through 4, 5 and 6 and 7.
Wait, I mean, I'm gonna have to work on that, like, I am working on it, but that's gotta be done. I mean, people need to know where they're going for the schools out.
That's what I mean,
Yeah.
and then you guys would have to come in and say, okay, then we can reconfigure elementary and we can do X, Y, and Z because you'll have one less class over there, right?
Yeah, you're gonna
Yeah,
have less.
so there's short term and then there's long term.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
So that's where the enrollment projections kind of help. So that we could say, okay, if we pull the 5th grade out, make it a 5th and 6th grade over here. And make this a pre-K to 4, in the long term, it's going to get X amount bigger. So in order to make that function as pre-K to 4, we need to do this and this and this to this building. And that's a plan, or a plan is to put 5, 6 on the back end of it and, you know, have some central cafeteria space, but they're completely separated. Like there's lots of options like that that could be explored. So we want to think short-term and long-term at almost the same time, so that you're not
Right.
moving people and then moving them back.
Yeah, it's kind of like, you know, school years, right? We are closing this school year out and planning for the next one. Sorry, Jake, but I think to the point being, you can handle, you know, we can handle anything as long as you have a plan. I mean, it's just, we just don't, we can have a plan.
We don't have a plan.
Like you said, we need that long, we need the overarching, this is what we're going for, and then incrementally, how we're gonna get
Mhm. Here's how we
from
get
here to there,
Yeah.
and
So the step of engaging with the
Yes.
state, pulling your numbers, marrying them together and seeing where things are. That's gonna be the next, that's really gonna give us some traction, some data that we can crunch through. And then figure out, okay, we have the information for the buildings, how do things get reorganized short term while we still look long?
Because we could take, you know, we could tie in the bureaucrats as exceptional need. Like we talked about.
That's
For
a
the
parallel
longer
path
term.
Yeah.
that we're going to do,
Yeah.
correct?
So some of the short-term stuff we could actually see next school year.
Yes.
Mhm.
Oh, you're gonna have to.
yeah, we have to.
Yeah.
Well, even, we're talking about summer work potentially,
Yeah,
Yeah, we talked about summer work,
Mhm.
like
and we can get things done this summer.
vinyl graphics,
Yeah.
things where people are seeing some changes, some updates where, hey, they gave us this survey, we responded. And now
Something
we're
happened.
We're seeing some action.
Something
That's,
happened,
that does a lot.
Sure.
It does.
Right,
You could fill in the doors, you could add smaller classrooms, a lot of that could probably be done this summer, probably get permits and everything pretty quickly. But
if we know- yeah, if we know it's where we're going, because actually, we're kind of focused on Carriage Trail too, but you can see all the open farmland that has the potential as this generation fades away and the up and comers might not want to farm that, so the potential for growth in our township probably is beyond what we're looking at immediately in Carriage Trail too. I mean,
There's more coming, I think.
cohesive,
Correct.
looking in the future, I mean, we're looking at,
And just thinking about what part of our land that we own, like, what's usable for what, you know, and just kind of having an idea of that. Well, here, we can buy up some of the land around us.
Well, I've talked to, like I said, like, you go out past the football field, it's 149 acres. And only, there's some of it over there that's protected by the buses. And there's some owl or something that lives over in there. I mean.
Have you seen it?
Protected species.
Yes.
That sounded sensitive. But the, yeah.
something all over there.
But anyway, those are, I mean, that's all, you know, usable land. And I mean, you know, if you think about it, and like we talked about, I met with the youth, you know, and I had this conversation, actually today. There's like no community, right? We don't have a city or a town, right? This is the focal point. So make it the focal point, you know, if you can get to the point where, you know, you could have, you know, a community center or something that's on our campus or an older building that we close down becomes a community. I mean, there's a lot of options you could do, but you know, as you move forward with all this, we are the center of town, you know, I met with over Christmas break, when none of the kids were here, I met with the, youth, sports and things like that, right? I mean, we've got, you know, we can give them soccer fields for youth soccer. All you gotta do is mow the grass, make sure it's level, and throw some nets out there. I mean, then they could congregate here, they could come here, they could play soccer. It's like, you know, the 20 acres out there that we have, that's how much we have out there. Where the baseball field and the soccer fields are now, you know, there's no water, or there's no, so that, you know, you come here, then, you know, you got access to things. I mean, some of that just makes sense. I mean, moving forward, you know, they're like, you would do that? I'm like, well, we got 140 some acres, it's just a field. I mean, you can play soccer on it.
Flat and grassy.
But, you know, I mean, those are the kinds of things, and they're like, oh, you know, people start to come here, and then you move down the road in the future, you've got, you know, either baseball diamonds here, softball diamonds.
This site could easily be active
Yeah.
from morning until night.
I mean, it is now, and there's not that much to do.
Could you put the property lines on this photo? Can you?
Yeah.
Add the
Yeah.
property lines?
Most definitely. Yeah, we've got a few different views of all of this, so we'll add that
Whichever
in
view, or
as an
just
exhibit.
so you get an idea of what's ours, you know?
I was looking at, it's all the way out here. It's the end of this tree line. Straight down.
It's a lot of
That is a
land.
lot, yeah. So that probably would be an issue to have one big campus here. I mean.
Correct.
It may have been a turning lane off Broad.
Mhm.
I mean, that would alleviate some,
Oh, yeah.
a lot
Like for games and stuff like that.
Yeah.
parking.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the first, I mean, when we were here originally, additional parking.
Right
in
there,
and out.
and opening it right at that end, take them in and accommodate the senior citizens and the handicap. So they don't have to travel a quarter of a mile to get into the stadium. They can,
It would avoid crisscrossing.
Yeah.
We also looked at that for bus routes too, separating that from parents dropping off,
Yeah.
so they're not passing between. Again, focusing on
Right.
safety and security.
and flow.
Especially like after a game, it's a matter of time before somebody gets run over,
Mhm.
because there's cars coming and going, and there's kids trying to cross and come off of that path from the
That's
game
right.
into the parking lot, and then people picking up, and some are exiting, some are entering, it's a lot.
Great, it's exciting
It
news.
is, yeah.
Any other?
Yes.
I was gonna ask, I apologize if, I missed this when I stepped out, so apologize, I'll circle back. When you had the list of words for each of the schools, did you happen to put a summary, like a Venn diagram of the common words between middle school and high school? And then maybe what was common between all of them?
We haven't done that, we separated.
That would be good, that's a good thought,
Yeah,
Natalie. I
that's a
like
good
that.
idea.
Because I think that would give us a lot of good data.
Engineering.
Because
Yeah.
I was like, when I was reading through it, it was just hard to remember it all. and
There's a
go
lot
back.
of similarities, so we
Yeah.
can definitely do a common slide.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. What's in the middle?
And I wonder, I mean, just little things, like, one of the big complaints in the elementary was the noise from the hand dryers, because they're in the hallway, like, is there a simple or quick, easy solution for just something like that? That can be done.
That's what I was gonna say.
Paper towels.
That's where my
When
mind.
it's in the
went.
hallway, they
Yeah.
won't be shoving them in the toilets, so.
Right, right.
True.
Yeah.
But, just little things like that you think, okay, let's get some low hanging fruit,
Exactly.
Yeah.
to make an impact.
And I think there were also some things in there that weren't necessarily facility related, like there were a couple tech items and some other things. So I think
Training.
it's good to get an understanding of all those
Yeah.
items and see if there's anything else that could be solved that isn't even related to the master planning process, but it's just a
Something-
frustration that maybe
Yeah.
nobody
Like
knew
you
about.
mentioned, the tech training.
Tech training,
Yeah.
yeah. Mhm.
A few felt like it was-
Internet,
felt-
inconsistent internet, that was
Yeah.
a big thing.
I think a few felt it was just like an email
Still is.
Right.
They would have to decipher and figure things out, so maybe during that 0 hour or 0 period, everybody comes together and here's a training session for this period.
Love zero.
That's a great idea.
Or even something like, where you train a few people and then they take it back to their group and they train their group, train the trainer kind of
Key
thing.
thing is record the training.
Yeah,
Absolutely, then they can watch it on their time or whatever.
Exactly.
put it on the staff website.
Quick
and
little
let 'em-
5-minute video and they figure out what they need to do.
I'm sure Mike will do those.
I will.
He'll narrate and everything.
Exactly.
Come on, I like to do videos.
Training with Mike.
I won't know what I'm doing. I'll have an activity
Mike can talk.
Just
in
AI it.
fact, Like, Mike can ask hands doing all this stuff.
Nice job, man.
So we really see some traction coming, getting the state involved, getting those numbers. And us being able to put some exhibits together, some graphs together, some plans together, to start diving into this.
Yeah, I love the idea of seeing the things that we can do right now that can help make their day-to-day lives so much better. Little things that make a big difference. That's great.
And then we're listening to their input.
Yeah.
Man, that's gonna be, that's key, because so many times people are asked questions
Oh, yeah.
and then nothing comes of it, and they feel like, oh, I just wasted my time, why should I put an effort in? So if you start showing it, not only in one school, but hit the middle school, hit a low hanging fruit for the elementary, the high school, it'll go far.
Especially if everybody gets something.
Yeah.
Yeah, people feel better.
Christmas in July.
Literally.
Any other comments, questions?
Thank you, this is
Thank you.
awesome.
Thank you
We
very
really
much.
appreciate
Thank
your
you so
guidance
We're,
and
we're
getting
excited.
this on the right.
Yeah. And thank you, Mike, and for Todd, the day I was here.
Yeah,
He was great helping me get into rooms and everything, so thank you to Todd for that. Much appreciated.
Yeah, thank you. You like clown around that day.
Never, right?
All right.
Yeah, switch back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Matt's gonna. There we go. Now I got that.
Public participation.
Yeah.
Who wants to go first? Don or you? I'll be.
Don Hughes, 9360 South Man Road, Bethel Township. I want to say thank you for keeping school going when I took my sabbatical.
We do good.
Did pretty good. I like the idea of the bathroom handbook. I really appreciated that, especially since Tip City's having that problem right now. I also want to let you know some things that's happening that you might want to further yourself, not with school specifically. There's a class called Constitution Live that will be in Tip City. That'll be great for kids as well as adults to go to. Probably February the 20th it will start. It's in the Tip City Gallery. I've taken one of the other courses up under Rick Green Patriot Academy. And number 2 is the short notice, February the 15th at 9:30 in Springboro Library. There's a class on executive orders, so you can understand what's legal and not legal. It's like from 9:30 to 12. If you want more information, you can give me a call. I'm not hosting it, so you won't have to listen to me. I also would like to suggest a calendar change from winter break to Christmas break. If you need an attorney to help you with that, let me know. I've got several that I know of. I believe we should have Christmas break because that's the Christmas holiday, federal holiday that we have. We don't celebrate winter. We don't celebrate solstice.
Solstice.
That's the word. Was just checking to see if you were paying attention.
I am.
So thank you very much. I never really realized what you do, and it took me about a year and a half sitting in these classes, because it's a presentation going on. Thanks for help with some of the people sitting with me, helped me out a lot. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm back.
All right, Julie, you're next.
Good evening, board. Well, I have nothing, but now I got one. Some of it is, FYI thing, but, so good evening. I'm just concerned and disappointed that the draft agenda for next week was not included in today's agenda for review. I'm concerned that consolidating it all into a single meeting will reduce open discussion on the items. It is nice for us, the public, to hear that said open discussion and debate of the agenda items. It's nice for the board to have time to research and to think through and consider all the pros and cons before voting on agenda items. I respectfully request that you return to publishing the draft agenda and have discussions on it at the work session. On facilities, which was not on my list, but, and wasn't on the agenda either, so I didn't even know. But as you guys know, this subject is very near and dear to my heart, so it's kind of frustrating to hear these reports. But just a few things so you know. The plan was not necessarily to tear down all of the old buildings. The OFCC only requires that we do not use them for student education. So they can be used for storage, for board offices, offices for staff and administration, et cetera, et cetera. Also, the plan was to backfill into the old elementary school for the next few years. And that was always, of course, he thought that it would start with probably the fifth graders, which would go from there to here, back over here, first. And that gives the district time to plan and get our ELP money from the state, which we haven't gotten yet. So it seems like the facilities planning is moving forward without any community input. The community didn't want the open spaces in the K-5. The community didn't want the K-5 located where it currently is. And I can give you a whole list of things that the community did not want and ended up the way it is. So, I suggest you bring the community in sooner. We've already looked at many of the options discussed. I mean, obviously not in the K-5 space because the K-5 didn't exist at the time. But like I said, didn't want the open spaces, et cetera. And also out here filling in these open spaces, we looked at that as well. And it was just cost prohibitive for the amount of classroom space it would gain because, light and all the other stuff on top of that, there's no good way to do construction in a space that's already got walls around it. So we were told it would be very costly to fill that in and you just don't gain that much space from it. So it might be better off doing something else. Also, the option to put an entry and exit on Agenbrod was denied to us due to the road width and some other factors. I don't remember them all. I think the previous architect should be able to provide a list of those answers. But I think a lot of it also had to do with the buses and turning off of Agenbrod because we in the township held off repaving that road because, we can only do so many miles every couple of years is what we do. And Agenbrod, that part of Agenbrod was on the list. And we only did the other side because we thought, well, if the school's going to use it, it might get torn up, turn lanes, et cetera, et cetera. So we would wait to do the rest of it. And then that didn't happen because of, like I said, we were denied. I feel like the work being done right now is a repeat of the past without the benefit of having anyone involved from the past. It also seems like with Carriage Trails 2.0 and more building coming, as you know, we have lots of farmland, as Regan pointed out. That we need something that can be reconfigured at will. So I just want to make a suggestion that you guys go look at Troy Christian schools. We had gone up, a couple of us from the board had gone up before. They construct metal buildings that allows them to reconfigure the insides as they need. And their reconfiguration is done by volunteers. So it's not even that difficult to do, but they had some really good ideas on stuff like that. So just an idea. And then one other question I had was, will that survey presentation be posted somewhere so that we can actually take a look at it? And as always, thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thanks, Julie.
Thank you.
Just,
Was it for public?
Right, so now we will go into executive session and there may be actions taken after this. But we'll figure that out.
Thanks, guys.
Thank
Thank
you.
for going home.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, FMD.
Thanks for coming.
Bitbond.com.
Appreciate it.
Do not keep that.
Second.
Oh,
Executive sessions for
I
number one, right?
motion to go into executive session. I'm sorry,
For number one.
we're doing 1 and what was the other 4?
1 and 3.
1 and 3, sorry.
But there's 2 under 1. There was, consider discipline of an employee and consider investigation or complaints against employees. And then number 3 was to consult with the board's attorney for court action.
So,
I
Mrs.
second.
Leskowitz,
Yes.
Mrs. Butler,
Yes.
Mrs. Donahue,
Yes.
Mr. Beat,
Yes.
Mrs. Kiplinger.
Yes.
7:16. Thank you. Thanks for coming, everybody.
Yeah.
We don't have to stay.